Everybody knows the name Bugatti, the most famous hypercars in the world. If we want to explain the history of this company, we have to use two words: sadness and success. If we want to know the history of this company, we have to go back about 100 years in Italy. On the 15th of September 1881, in the city of Milan, a little boy was born named Ettore Bugatti. His father, meaning Carlo Bugatti, was a very successful businessman that sold furniture and also designed jewelry. The entire family was very creative. His father was already a successful furniture designer. Ettore was a brilliant artist. His brother Rembrandt was a professional sculptor. But alongside all the creative things and artistry, Ettore loved one more thing, and that's mechanics. Things that work mechanically. Things like bicycles, trains, watches, and cars. Ettore had a bicycle at a very young age, and he always loved modifying it and working on it. And you could say his father Carlo Bugatti would see this, and he was impressed with what he knew. And because of that, he took him to a factory nearby, a factory that was ran by Prinetti and Stucci. When he asked them to hire his kid, they say, "We don't hire children." But Carlo told them, "I don't want you to hire my son as an employee. I want to hire him so you can teach him about mechanics." And when he offered them money, the owner of the shop agreed and hired the little boy. Ettore works in this shop for a couple of years, and when he gets to the age of 17, he has already designed his own tricycle from the ground up. And after a while, he realizes that he can add an engine to it. So he basically invented a motorcycle from the ground up by himself. You could say the reason for the success of Ettore Bugatti was his father Carlo taking him to this factory and making his passion even stronger for mechanical things. When you get to the year 1900, Ettore Bugatti is only 19 years of age, but at this young age, he has decided to completely design his own car and eventually build it. In the beginning, we said he was a very brilliant artist. So when you put the mechanical knowledge and the artistry together, you get someone that's very good at designing cars. He would design cars at a young age that other engineers and designers wouldn't believe. A lot of people would talk smack about it, that it's not possible to build these, but most people would appreciate it and call Ettore designs beautiful. All the designs of these cars made Ettore Bugatti kind of famous in the car designing world. So a German company decided to hire him, a company called D. Dietrich. They immediately contacted him and asked him to come join us and design cars for us. When you get to the year 1903, Ettore Bugatti is only 22 years old, and at this age, he had already designed his car and completely built it from the ground up. He had designed this car for a race between Paris and Madrid, but when the judges saw this car, they told him that he cannot race this thing because no cars in this race stands a chance. You could say it was more advanced than any car at that time. Ettore Bugatti was the first car designer that said the engine of the car should sit lower on the chassis and further back for balance. After a few years, he quits his job at D. Dietrich and gets a job at Deutz to design engines for them. Even though Bugatti is working for different companies, he's not really interested in staying here long term. He's just trying to gain information and experience to start his own company and design his own cars. He wanted cars that were lightweight, powerful, and beautiful, and all his designs had this in mind. Just like he was thinking this, he was designing his own car and building it in his own garage. And eventually, in the year 1908, he had designed the first ever Bugatti with his own name on it, the Bugatti Type 10. The Type 10 had a 1.2-liter four-cylinder, but the thing that made it special was that the car only weighed 365 kilograms. This low weight and a powerful engine compared to its weight made this car go about 80 kilometers an hour. And this made it one of the fastest cars in the 1900s. And this is when he finally opens his own business, Automobili Ettore Bugatti. Whenever there was any type of race around Europe, Ettore Bugatti would take his Type 10 there to just show it off and tell the other races that this is a race car, not what you're driving. And after this, it causes the race community around the world to know the name Bugatti very well. This is around the same time that Bugatti's first son is being born, Jean Bugatti. Since Ettore was becoming very successful in the racing world, he took the Type 10 and made it better in every way, and that slowly turned the car into the Type 13. He also designed a new engine with 4 valves per cylinder, an engine that created 30 horsepower, and the car only weighed 300 kilograms, so it was one of the fastest cars at that time. And this made the Bugatti name even bigger, and not only car enthusiasts knew about it, but most people knew about it. And that's all because most newspapers would write about him, and after everybody was talking about them, Bugatti became one of the most well-known car brands in the racing world. But all of a sudden, everything took a turn, and it was a bad one, because World War I began. When this war began, it closed all the factories that had something related to what Bugatti was doing, and nobody cared about race cars for a while. Even though his factory was closed, but Ettore's mind was not. He continued designing and made his Type 13 better and better on paper. When World War I ends, Ettore tries to apply all the modifications to the car he had designed, and the Type 13 that was upgraded was very successful. And all the rich and wealthy people that were interested in racing, they wanted a Bugatti Type 13. After his company started to thrive once again, he designed a new car, the Bugatti Type 35. You could say the Type 35 is one of the most successful race cars in the world. You might say modern race cars will smoke this thing, but you have to know that in its era, nothing else could keep up with this thing, and that is why it won trophy after trophy, making it one of the most successful race cars in the world. And when you get to the 1930s, the most famous race car is the Type 35. It's around this time that Jean Bugatti, his son, tells his dad that we should take these race cars, make them a tiny more luxury, and sell it to wealthy people that are not interested in racing, but they want something amazing like your cars. Jean gave a great idea to Ettore, and they designed their very first luxurious car, the Type 41 Bugatti Royale. Saying the Type 41 was a success is an understatement, because every wealthy person at that time wanted to buy one, and that's the reason they had to put a limit on it. They would only sell it to kings and queens and British aristocrats. These customers were enough to sell out all the cars Bugatti is gonna make. When you get to the middle of the 1930s, the Great Depression has hit the world pretty hard, in a way where wealthy people aren't even interested in Bugatti's cars anymore. You have to know that Bugatti was starting in Germany, but they continued doing it in France. And that is why, to not make the Bugatti car brand go bankrupt, the French government helped them out and told them to design us trains and build them, and Bugatti agreed. It's at this time when Ettore realizes that his son Jean is exactly like him. He's fascinated by mechanical and beautiful works of art like his cars, and he's very passionate about the company. That is why when the Great Depression is finally over, he hands over the keys to the company to his son Jean Bugatti and tells him he can run everything now. You could say Jean Bugatti makes the company thrive even harder, and he designs even more luxurious and desirable cars. In simple terms, hypercars of the 1930s. At around that time, Jean Bugatti releases one of the greatest cars ever made, the Bugatti Type 57, which is also known as one of the most beautiful cars. After 90 years, this design is unbeatable. Just imagine seeing this in 1937. Jean Bugatti was a son that every father dreamed of, and he was following every goal Ettore Bugatti had. Just like his father, not only was he an engineer, but he was fascinated by engineering and mechanical things. So any car that was finished designing, he would take it for a test drive and actually drive it in the track himself. On the 11th of August 1939, while he's test driving one of the Bugatti Type 57 that the factory had made, all of a sudden, an intruder bicycle enters the track. A bicycle that was not supposed to be there. Since he was in the middle of the track, Jean had to swerve out of the way, but when he swerved, he turned into a tree and smashed right into it, killing him on the spot. After this has taken place, Ettore is more than depressed. He loved his son, a son that he couldn't imagine losing, and that is why he took the biggest hit. 3 months after this tragedy, Ettore Bugatti was confronted with another one. The Germans enter France. They take over his factory and arrest him. They tell him, if you want to be released, you have to design torpedoes for us, which he heavily declined, and they put him in prison. After a while, the Germans realize that they can't just leave him in prison, so they finally release him, and he can stay under German control in Paris. In 1945, the war is over and the Germans are defeated, and this is when France is in French control once again. This was Bugatti's time to finally get his factory back. But when the new government confronts him and asks him questions, they get skeptical and ask him, why did the Germans release you from prison and why are you an Italian citizen? He says that he was born in Italy, but he was working in France. And long story short, they blame him that he's a spy for the Germans and they don't return his belongings or his factory. You could say this was the last stab to Ettore Bugatti's heart, and you can't get any more sad and depressed than this. After a year, they return his letter and tell him there has been a mistake and you can have your factory back. But it was too late, because 10 days after receiving this letter, Ettore Bugatti died. Ettore Bugatti's family got back the factory, but they didn't have the passion that he and his son Jean had, so the company was a complete dead end. This bankrupt company remains until we get to the year 1987, when there's a new buyer in town wanting to purchase this company, an Italian entrepreneur named Romano Artioli. He purchased the company and raises the Bugatti name from the ashes. He starts off the company with this car, the Bugatti EB110. The company was in good hands, someone that had the passion Ettore and Jean once had, but unfortunately, it was a dead end as well. He couldn't get many sales, and the company was facing bankruptcy. After facing bankruptcy, it seems like the company of Volkswagen was waiting for this day. And when it finally hit, they asked him to sell the company. Since Artiole owed a lot of money and he was facing bankruptcy, he was willing to sell. And they agreed on a price of $50 million. And Bugatti was in Volkswagen's hands now, a company that cannot be bankrupt anymore. After this, Bugatti's company continued growing faster than it ever did. It is true that Ettore and Jean Bugatti are no longer around, and the company is not their family's, but their name still remain on these cars, and their name will go down in history as one of the first hypercars in the world.